Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Boris Johnson's latest cover-up, and in this case, probably the more sinister. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So, when I say Russian interference, it doubtless brings to mind the work that the Kremlin undertook in order to get their boy, Donald Trump, into the White House. After all, there'd been a huge high-profile investigation which ought at long last to lead to some even more public revelations during Trump's impeachment trial next year. But this was not just a one-off. Vladimir Putin, the Russian authorities, have been trying to act to destabilise the West for some time. The UK's own military and intelligence leaders have been warning for years that the Kremlin was becoming increasingly aggressive in its moves and that our governments were not taking the threats seriously. But it's not just the United States where they are believed to have had an impact already. It's strongly believed that Russia interfered successfully in both the 2016 Brexit referendum and the 2017 general election. This would lead us to believe that it would also take an active part in the 2019 general election as well. It included the claim that Russian Twitter bots posted 45,000 messages in a 48-hour period during the Brexit referendum campaign. But this has been a much lower key investigation, was not on such a large scale as the American one, and of course was not sensationalised in the news. But an investigation has taken place nonetheless by the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee. The report was completed a few weeks ago and had to go through number 10 for security clearance. It is not believed that there is any classified information remaining in the report, and so there is no reason not to publish it. The government was supposed to have released it for publication now. They haven't. Now, the chair of the committee, you may have heard of him, Dominic Grieve, told the House of Commons today that it had not been cleared, that the Prime Minister seemed to be sitting on it in order to keep the findings from the public ahead of the general election. And with Parliament dissolving next Wednesday, if nothing is done about it by Tuesday, Boris Johnson will be keeping evidence of Russian interference in our polls, our general election, referendum, from the British public leading up to a crucial general election. And so the opposition voting through this general election on Boris Johnson's terms looks even more mindless than it did at the beginning of the week. I begin to wonder if there's anything else our opposition leaders would like to do in aiding Johnson's abuse of the United Kingdom. In response, Downing Street made it clear that they have no intention of allowing it to be published anytime soon. Oh, we need more time. But it has already been cleared by the Cabinet Office. So we know it doesn't contain any classified information. It doesn't. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been cleared by the Cabinet Office. Clearance by the Prime Minister should not be taking this long. It should really just be a formality. There is nothing in it that is unfit for public view. Only embarrassing for Conservative Brexiteers like the Prime Minister. Now, without it being published, we can't really say what it contains exactly, of course. However, the fact that so many people who were involved directly in the report are indicating that it does show Russian interference, we can take it as read that Kremlin involvement has been shown. But most of the public will not find out before it's too late. It's been said many times that we should not describe any people, politicians or political activists, as traitors over Brexit. The word has been used far too often. It is true, I've avoided using it myself. But I draw the line at a Prime Minister who is concealing evidence of assaults on our country, attacks on our country by an unfriendly power. And by concealing such evidence, they are actively encouraging that unfriendly foreign power to continue and even escalate those attacks. That more than earns the moniker of traitor to me, in an everyday use of the term at least, even if not in legal terms where, actually these days, it's pretty much impossible to commit the criminal act of treason. And although links between Boris Johnson and the Kremlin are not as notorious as those between Trump and Putin, they still exist. You haven't heard Johnson publicly praising Putin at every opportunity, so those links have been more easily flying under the radar. That Johnson has had links with the Russian ambassador would not necessarily in itself be suspect. After all, he once was our Foreign Secretary for a short time. Though we should also remember that when he was first made Foreign Secretary, oversight of MI6, which is normally for the Foreign Secretary, which is our overseas intelligence service, was removed from his area due to concerns about his Russian connections. So these links predate his time in the Foreign Office and were a concern even amongst his colleagues in cabinet, in particular the Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May. But the government have since told the National Crime Agency that investigations into dirty Russian money being laundered in the UK is not to be made a priority. In other words, look the other way or we might have to cut your funding. Gone is the hard line taken against Russia and the Kremlin based on the wake of the Salisbury poisonings. That's all disappeared now by the looks of it. And so it may be that Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, already an obvious disaster if he still occupies the role after the general election, will end up being in the pocket of both Trump and Putin to the detriment of whatever is left of the UK in a few years' time. Actually, if Trump is in Putin's pocket, then maybe Johnson's just in Trump's pocket, because then he'd be in both. He'd be in the pocket of a pocket. Yeah. But the point is that he may be politically naive, but he doesn't parade his stupidity as loudly as Trump. He'll keep his support for the Kremlin, but people generally won't find out about it because he won't be shouting about it. He won't be constantly publicly praising Putin. So it will carry on flying under the radar, especially with us being distracted by other outrages while our country burns from the enemies both within and without. It was often said that if Boris Johnson succeeds, he could be the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom ever. And the extent of the damage that he is willing to inflict on us is becoming more and more alarming, especially when he's been so successful at hiding his activities and the activities of enemies from the public at large. It is actually really worrying and just more reason why we absolutely have to get rid of him at this general election. And there'll be more on that coming over the coming weeks. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.